Episode 5, let's go.
Oh, here we are. Welcome everyone to episode 5 of Pussy Woman. Raise your hands. Woo!
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Feel
We're
it.
here
Feel
in
it.
the house.
Feel it.
The 5th episode, which is all about change, baby. Change is in the air.
Right. It's right. And yes, we've been having fun before this conversation. There is a vibe. I'm so happy to be recording this conversation with Eva Grace. Woo! Because we always have the most beautiful conversation personally, but really this is a focused, intentional invitation to dive into the realms of pussy. So I'm so happy you are here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. You know this was one of my favorite topics.
I do. And I can't wait for those people who don't know you to find out who you are. And I'm going to hand over the reins to you with I can't even say it. Explanation.
An explanation, darling.
Yes, darling.
Would you like me to explain the enigma that is me?
Yes.
Right, so I'll do my best. Well, I've been working on a resume this week, and I've been revamping it to more reflect who I am. And it's interesting because in the beginning of my bio, it literally says, Eva Grace is the unbranded, unboxable, artistic CVO, Chief Visionary Officer. And that truly is my true skill set, because I'm a lot of things, but none of those things are the totality of me. I've played so many roles, but those roles do not define who I am. For example, I am a mother. I've been a birth mom. The first child I gave birth to, I handed to the arms of another mother to raise. Then I had 3 children of my own, and then I adopted my last child, my 5th child. So then I asked another mother to hand her child to me. So I've been both a birth mom, a natural mom, a adopted mom, and then I was married to a second husband after my first divorce, and I was a stepmom. And I realized that I knew the dynamics of every kind of mother there is. I was even a grieving mom because I lost twins, miscarried twins. So understanding all of the different avenues of mom was not something I was deficient in. You know what I mean? So there was no woman on the planet that I could not relate to. But what happens when there's no one around and all of my children go back to Utah and there's no one to call me mom? All of a sudden I was like, wait a second, there's no one calling me mom. I'm not really sure what my role is now. And that began the process of kind of reclamation of who the fuck am I without a label. And that was the beginning of a journey I could never have anticipated. Because I began to let myself try on different roles for myself, right? And as an artist, the way that I expressed myself was through art, right? I was raised in Mormonism, and I was raised codependent. So I didn't know what thinking for myself really was, because I'd been so conditioned from a very early age to trust what a man thinks above what I think. And so I was married for the first time for 21 years. And coming out of that marriage, I was a single mom and just started doing art like I was breathing, like it was my own therapy. because I realized when I was sitting in front of a blank canvas, I didn't have any other voices in my head. That was the first place that it was quiet, that it was still. No one was telling me what colors to use. No one was telling me to paint. No one was telling me that what I was doing was right or wrong. It was the first place I could feel myself. And it was the first place that I began to channel the divine. The first place my angels got in contact with me, because it was the first place that I got still. So, you know, art then took on a different tone, because as I began making more art, that's when I connected to my second husband. And that's when I began connecting to my own sexuality in a way that I had always shamed and run from. And I realized that my creativity and my connection to my art was directly linked to my sexual exploration, my sexual expansion, my sexual expression, how much I was receiving this bodily pleasure. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the first time I understood how connected they were mm-hmm. in this creative space of being a woman. Mm-hmm. Right? And the messages that would come through in my art were like direct messages to me. And I'm like, oh my God, God is speaking to me through my art. Did you hear that? And it was literally that transformative for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I could channel my own guidance if I sat at the floor of my own blank canvas. And so after my second divorce, which was, let's see, 4 years ago now, life completely began to evolve in a different way. And I began understanding how nuanced creation is and how powerful my perception was. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really began to jump into the world of metaphysics. I went to yoga teacher training. I was Reiki trained, second level. And then I started meditating like a monk. I have no other way to say it, except that meditation became this obsession because I was getting such an education. And I was receiving information that I hadn't heard anywhere else. And it felt like the most pure kind of deconditioning process I'd ever been through. Right? This purging from the inside out, all of these little rocks and pebbles that I had carried for so long. And oddly enough, this purging process came through COVID. And that's when you and I connected.
I know. I literally love your introduction of yourself. I'm like, it's a new world. It's like saying that everything that you are programmed to believe about yourself isn't who you really are. And who you really are is to explore for yourself. And that is what I'm really seeing with what you've just said, and how much of an invitation and permission slip that is for people to really go, oh, okay.
Yes, truly.
So does that not really matter? Because that's sort of what I like receive whenever you talk about like the journey into yourself, about how much those like boxes just dissolve. And
they do.
Like,
yes, they do.
Wow, what's here? What's here? Who am I? How do I relate to the world now as me? So maybe that's a powerful question. How did you sort of start to then change the way you're relating to life in this new space?
It took a lot of, okay, let me explain it to you this way. When you learn simple math in kindergarten, you want to do math. You understand this process that gives you this very clean equation, and there's such satisfaction in being able to figure out math problems, right? It's fun. You've learned this way of understanding a little tiny building block of the universe. Right? But once you learn multiplication and division, simple math isn't fun anymore. Right? You now have new ways of computing. So you want more complex problems to solve for math to continue to stay fun. You know what I mean? Well, starting on this path of deconditioning or unwinding or taking away the boxes is like this process of taking away everything we are not. And once you discover who you are underneath the everything you are not, the R-ness of you naturally begins to expand. And then you want to stretch the limits of your own capabilities just to solve more complex equations within yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's this process of closing every loop from your childhood that ever fragmented you from your soul.
Ooh,
Basically, that simple. Right? Once you close all of those inner fragmentations, you're no longer a sieve that leaks water, that leaks love, life force energy out into the world. You are this closed vessel that is so effervescent that any light that comes in you naturally flows out of you from a place like a fountain of wholeness. Right? The fountain will not spurt water in any direction if the foundation is leaking. It won't even hold water. And so many humans are walking around with these leaky vessels. And what I discovered was about myself, my metaphysical gifts are to be able to see the cracks in the human, to see the cracks in the business, to see the cracks in the family. And like that beautiful Japanese art, I know how to come in there with gold, love, baby, and seal up the cracks. And once you seal up a crack, literally you're golden. Your energy field is altered. And that's what this process is of reclamation, is coming back to the remembrance of just how powerful we are when we are whole. And wholeness here goes out into the world and creates a society, ripple effects of wholeness, right? There's no more divide in race or religion, right? There's only opportunities for us to find a new way of communing. Right? That's what eyes of wholeness give you, is your perception of every problem. Just because there's just simply more complex equations to figure out. And that's the beauty of everyone returning to their own artistry, right? Is that there is artistry in gardening. There are ways of making container gardens for every apartment in every city, right? Where humans can connect to food again. And there is artistry in the way that we harness energy right out of the air. And when you take people out of fight or flight and survival mode, they naturally become more creative and infuse life back into the world. Right? That's the natural regenerative process of the human. Right? Is when you're not a caterpillar scooting along the ground, you're a butterfly flying through the air, adding wonder and whimsy, beauty. That's what transformation does. And so for me, I have been part of so many other humans' transformation that I understand clearly what I am about. Right? It's literally in the witnessing of the effect that I've had on other people that has proven to me who I am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And oddly enough, that closing of the loop thing from the childhood, my childhood, my biggest wound was my fear of men, because they held my only connection to God. In Mormonism, you have to go through your father or your brother or your uncle or your bishop, and then your stake president, and then the prophet, and then you can get to God, right? And so anything that comes through the prophet is coming directly from God and trickles down to all of us, right? So as a woman, I didn't have access to my own intuition. Every man around me owned my intuition. And so reclaiming that for me was the biggest kind of journey for me to go on. And that's precisely why I put Chief Visionary Officer on my resume. It's because I recognized how many millionaires, billionaires, businessmen, military officers, powerful elites were literally living off of my advice. I was counseling, well, people who were very disconnected from themselves. And I realized that that's where my greatest gift lives, is in my ability to see the biggest picture. And that's why I am a visionary, is because I can see visions of patterns, right? Because I know how to move through the quantum fields the way that I do, I can go back to a moment in the past or a probability in the future, and I'm able to read the patterning. And so that has given me a very different perspective of what's happening, the storyline of what's been happening in the world. And it took some really rough experiences, going into some very dark places with some very dark people, before I recognized that I was the light that was being asked to turn on in the middle of these very evil places.
Yeah.
And so, I can't run from what my light is meant for. That's what I realized. And learning how to listen to my pussy has literally saved my life.
Enter pussy. Enter. How did you first? Yeah. How did you first connect? What was that story?
How did I first connect? It hasn't been a first. There hasn't been a moment that I can pinpoint it to, except the moment when I finally heard when my womb was weeping. And that was when I was writing my memoir. And I was living in Mexico. And for the first time, I was living in my own 2-bedroom apartment. I called it 11th Heaven. I had my own rooftop balcony outside. And I wrote a memoir, 86,000 words in 3 months. It just poured through me. It was very healing. But right before the majority of the writing started, I gathered all the healers that I knew in Mexico, and I had a goddess gathering on my rooftop. And it was very methodical. In my guides were giving me instructions every day for what to prepare. Today, you need to go gather these items. And they wouldn't give me the play out of what was supposed to happen on the night of the goddess gathering. It was just, these are the women you need to invite. This is what needs to go on the invitation. It needs to be a handmade invitation for each of them individually. This is what you need to prepare food-wise. This is what you need to prepare health-wise. It was like just very simple instructions every day for this gathering, right? And it was nothing that I was contriving. I'd never done anything like this gathering. But some very profound things happened that night. I did a foot washing of all of the women there. We all wrote down intentions for that year, and we burned them and had a rooftop fire ceremony. And then we all had food. There was cacao. It was a really beautiful night. But during the foot washing, I had several of the women tell me that they were having flashes of previous lifetimes with me. And when we got up to the rooftop and we started sharing, all of a sudden I realized that I had called together women who had never had children, never birthed a child. No one there had ever been married. I was the only woman who did not have an actual womb because I had a hysterectomy when I was 26. And I had all these women around me whose creative centers still bled. Their cycles were still in sync, right? And they were coming into their season of medicine, learning their own spiritual medicine. And so I'm sitting there on my rooftop, marinating in the codes of these powerful priestess women. And I'm like, oh God, this was for me. Oh God, something's happening. Oh my God, my womb's about to talk.
Wow.
So then the next day I'm in meditation and I'm on the roof. I'm laying there in the same place where we had our fire circle. And I'm not on mushrooms, but I'm taken like in a mushroom journey, okay, to a lifetime where I was literally being burned at the stake as a witch.
Wow.
And I could feel the flames on my feet, and I could smell smoke. And I opened my eyes out of the meditation to make sure I was still where I was.
Yeah.
And my guides were like, you're not done yet. Go back, go back. So I closed my eyes, and literally the women I had called around me were the ones watching me burn at the stake.
Wow.
They were helping me reclaim my wounded medicine from that lifetime. And after that ceremony, after that meditation, the book started to pour out of me, and my womb started to tell me about all of its pain and how much I had been abusing my own creative center. And where I was so disconnected from myself. So my conversation with my pussy didn't really begin until then, right? I didn't understand how much wisdom was still there because I still had an energetic womb, right? I didn't have a physical womb, but I still had a spiritual womb, an emotional womb, a mental womb that was all still. Have you ever seen those Carillion photography where they cut off a piece of the leaf, but you can take a picture of it energetically, the leaf is still there?
Yeah.
Right? You know that photography that can read, that even though the physical aspect of something is gone, energetically, it is not gone. You know what I'm saying? Well, that's also how we leak energy. Is that we don't understand, I had this massive energy leak in my womb because I hadn't listened to the traumas that were still there. And that's what writing my memoir was really for me, was to get all the stories out of my body so that I could be a clear vessel, so that I could see myself clearly. And it's kind of incredible, the timing of us having this conversation. Because I was just going through another clearing cycle of a betrayal, if you will, to my creation from last year at this exact time. And it was from a man who was cock blocking me that I had met the previous year at this exact time. Okay, so I was like, oh God, the timing of this, the timing of all of this, it is never accidental. And, you know, it's been a really hard lesson for me to understand how to let men close to me without allowing them to cock block me. Either psychically, right, where they want to poke their head into my etheric space without being invited, right, where they want to invade my dream space, where they want to insert themselves into my story where I didn't ask them to insert themselves. You know, there are all kinds of ways that men will try to attach and feed off of the creative energy of a woman. And for so long, we've thought that that was just sexual, but it's not. That's not just sexual.
So much deeper than that. That's something so powerful to speak to in terms of if people are feeling like there's kind of that like feeling under attack on some level, like you're saying, whether that's like spiritually, emotionally, and not just physically. How can they like really start to reclaim that center of creation that is ours? I think that that's a big piece of the reclamation of pussy, is that, as you're saying, it's your creational center, and how to like strengthen that connection with your own boundaries as well.
I like to remember, no matter who I'm talking to, because women will also cock block. Right? A woman who is really in her masculine, who's jealous. I like to think of a cock block as misuse of something that was meant to be for pleasure. It was meant to give life, not to stand in the way of life. And because both men and women will do it. And energy only flows two directions. You are either draining or infusing. You are either deconstructing or constructing. You are either linking arms with and rising together, or you are attaching and pulling. And so a cock block can be so many things, but it is human to human combat, one trying to power over the other. And that only comes from someone in a disempowered place. So they're disempowered, they're reaching for power, and they do what war does, which is to dominate, which is to control, which is to manhandle, right? And flow doesn't do any of that. So a cock block is nothing more than adding resistance to any situation. And reclamation of pussy is literally understanding how to access your own Amrita and grease the fucking flow of your life. It's understanding that the pussy takes a beating and she turns that beating into her own pleasure. Right? You want to bring your cock into my world? You better drop to your knees first, wet my pussy before you get to insert anything. You come and you show me you're a king deserving of my golden Amrita elixir, or you get the fuck out of my mixer.
Booyaka.
Right? It's the pussy knows what's up. Right? The pussy knows what's up. And a woman disconnected from her pussy acts like a man. And I don't know if you've ever seen a boardroom full of men whose cocks are under the table, but they're sitting there doing a circle jerk with each other, or they're pissing on each other underneath the table and they don't think anybody could smell it. Right? And here's the beauty of being so connected to my pussy, is that I read the energy of what's going on above and below the belt. Which means I use my language provocatively to call out the bullshit that happens underneath the table. That's reclaiming the pussy. Right? Is it doesn't matter whether you are head of state. I'm going to talk to you like I'm talking to myself. There is no role that anybody can put on in front of me that's going to make me treat them less or more than me. And so when people come into my space, I see them and treat them as an equal, but I don't bullshit. Right? And that has been the most profound part about learning how to read energy, is that I don't have judgment of it, which is why people think that I'm like Mother Teresa, because people will come and confess their shit to me. But what most people don't understand is that they're confessing for themselves. I am merely like a mirror, that they're doing their own mirror work. I have no judgment. I have nothing to say about what they confess. Right? It's not my story. And so I know how to be an impartial observer well enough to let people see themselves. And when we are seen without judgment, something miraculous happens. Our own fragmentations heal. God, if we only knew how simple it was. You know?
Yeah.
We'd see right through the illusions.
That beautiful space of love, to return to that. I mean, wow, that is such a journey, isn't it? That's such a, yeah, that fragmentation, returning to that love and place where you don't need to be connected to the fragmentation to feel yourself. So it's coming back around to what you were talking about earlier, which is when we can heal that, we can see who we really are. We are not defined by our fragmentation. We are defined by that whole self.
Correct. I think it even goes further than that, though, in that letting your head take the back seat and drop into your heart space is learning how to use your heart space as your new speaking mechanism. Because here's the facts about us as human beings, is your heart has its own frequency that can be felt 12 feet away from you. Your heart is already louder energetically than your head. But when you're disconnected from your heart, it's like you're walking around with like a blockhead, right? Right? You're a total blockhead. Because the heart speaks differently than the ego. And you cannot intellectualize the journey into the heart. You got to take the back door, baby. Oh, you got to just take it in the back door. You got to take it good and hard. until there is no more shame left in that little asshole of yours. And then when the asshole shame just kind of, well, then it's all over from there. You know, and that's when you understand that the pussy also speaks through the heart.
The bum hole, we've talked about this many a time, and how much that sits at the root of our being, and how even talking about the bum hole is so like there's so much it's so uncomfortable for people to feel that's
why I talk about it, is
feel it in your body.
It's been so uncomfortable for me.
Right? Oh yeah, everyone on the planet.
Well, but I particularly have a lot of uncomfortableness because I had an asshole surgery. Literally, the doctor that did that surgery is in jail now because it's such a barbaric surgery. So that was during my first marriage. So my second marriage, he loved the asshole, loved it. And so there was this moment of my first marriage absolutely was so full of shame that I had this surgery that almost killed me.
Wow. Why?
And literally left me deformed, right? So then second marriage, I reclaimed that trauma with a man who tells me that my asshole is the most beautiful thing he's ever seen because it looks like a flower. I was like, I can get on board with that. I think we can play here. Let's make this a new playground. And all of a sudden, that's when I understood how the shame literally was shaken right at me. The anal sex with my second husband was epic. It was epic. And it literally healed that fragmentation of that trauma. And that's why I do talk about these things, is because they were my experience, right? I'm not talking about anything that I talk about through concept of anybody else's life, right? I have nobody else's life to talk about. I am not interested in discussing what other people do with their lives unless I have a direct connection to influence that life or that with my conversation, right? Because for me, I can only construct in my life, in my experience, and I can only influence in someone else's. And the influence that I choose to have in the world is direct influence. I want to touch. I want to see the humans grow in front of me. I want to see what sunlight does on their skin. I want to see the twinkle in their eyes when they light up from the inside. Right? I talk about my life experience and what I have lived because I had to heal the shame, and I know what it feels like in this body without shame.
Owning it.
I know now how to hear my own pussy because I was deaf to it before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just have to
and there's
ask
only one person.
What happened with your bum hole? What surgery? This just sounds awful.
Oh, it was awful. It was awful.
Why did you do it?
Well, because I had a hemorrhoid after a trip to Vegas. And I'd never had a hemorrhoid like this before, even after having babies. I went to a doctor, and the doctor was using women, getting them addicted to pain medicines, and then trading sexual favors for pain medicine. This was his stick. So I come to find out the surgery that he performed, instead of just slicing off the hemorrhoid and cauterizing it, which is what you're supposed to do, he did something that hasn't been done for a very long time, which is he goes up into the asshole, like into the anus, and strips, like with a vegetable peeler, the veins right out. So he basically takes this circle and slices it 3 ways so that it's now a flower. But there are more nerve endings in the asshole than anywhere. So it was the easiest place to get when addicted to pain pills.
Oh.
And I literally thought I was dying. I've never been in more pain in my entire life. So, and look, here I am. I can talk about it now.
It's huge. And how did you, so were you on painkillers for a long time because of it?
No, I was on painkillers for like 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'm not an addictive person, and I don't like giving anything my power at all. So for me, it pissed me off more than anything. And I don't like having anyone have any kind of control over me. So that was also part of my reclamation with my second marriage, was I began to heal my body. So my thyroid healed, my sleeping meds healed, my pain pills healed. So, you know, I was on sleeping pills, a thyroid medication, because my thyroid had been, my metabolism had been fucked up since I'd lost my womb. I had been on artificial hormones for 22 years because I didn't have any ovaries. So I was very much attached to the medical system. And anywhere I contemplated traveling, I was always researching doctors first. Will I be able to find a doctor to take care of me, right? When I listened to Joe Dispenza's book, it was right in the middle of me doing a lot of art, and I was learning about my flow differently, and hadn't yet done yoga teacher training at all. But I listened to Joe Dispenza's book, and he was talking about how we are the placebo. That book, coupled with the man that I was married to, who's a genius, made me challenge everything I believed about my body. Everything I believed about my medications, everything I believed about the food that I was eating. My food was changing. My eating habits were changing. My routines were changing. My sleep habits were changing. And I was dropping weight for no reason. And I realized I was doing the healing with every belief that I changed. My body was responding in kind. And I was literally causing this effect. And I was reversing things in my body that I'd been addicted to, right? I do not like anything controlling me. So that doctor that did that surgery on me, you know, did his best, like all men do, to cock block me. But it's not in my nature. So coffee, it's not an addiction, it's a choice.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Totally different. This is part of my sanctuary, my morning, my ritual, my devotion to myself. Right? So there are sacred practices that I have infused into my world, but I've also had to learn to be very flexible with those practices. Like finding out that the favorite creamer that I loved had aborted fetal cells in it, right? Then immediately I'm like, oh, new information. Oh my God, I have to adjust. I have to adapt. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And I learned how to make my own creamer with cinnamon and cacao and coconut milk and half and half. And, you know, things that my body literally loves first thing in the morning.
That sounds really yum, by the way.
It is. It's very yum.
1 minute. Coconut milk, cacao. Yes. What was the other thing?
Cinnamon. Little bit of raw sugar or honey. And so I make it with a thick coconut milk so that it's almost like a very, very, very dark, rich chocolate souffle that I put in my coffee. And so then it's just like this really,
Wait, you put that in your
decadent.
coffee? You put that in
Yes.
your
Yes, that's what I put in my coffee. So my coffee in the morning is this infusion of cacao, coconut milk, cinnamon, delight.
You literally
That's how I start my day.
Bar. You've raised the bar.
I did. And I did that because I learned that my favorite creamer had a toxin in it. Right. And that's the power of the reclamation of pussy, is learning how to listen to what is toxic to us.
Yeah.
Why do they put aborted skin cells from fetuses in the creamer? There's only one reason. Greed, profit, cock block on a corporate scale. It's not for the well-being and the nourishment and the life-giving properties. The government only has one agenda, and that is to cock block humanity. And so the more I began to see on a mass scale what was happening under the boardroom table, well, the more I understood what I came here to kind of blow the lid off of. I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing here.
Intoxicating
exactly
morning
what
drink.
I'm doing here.
Like,
yes, it is.
Morning drink.
And the fact that I'm fucking up their agenda in the process because I'm reclaiming my own morning sanctuary beverage, right? And no longer giving them my money, honey.
Yep.
There are more ways to skin a cock blocking cat. I don't know where that even came from.
It's like, okay, the visualization.
But there's a lot of wolves wearing skinned cats clothing.
No more sheep and
they're like, they're not gonna notice. Nobody's gonna notice. I'm like, oh yeah, I notice. Your cock's dangling out there, telling the whole world what you're really about.
I feel like that's a perfect place to end for everyone who has watched the entirety of this full-blown, like, reclaim the orgasmic creational life force through your morning coffee. Like, let's set invitation for those of you who really want to.
There's always opportunities, right? It's our job to find the places where we have given up a little bit of our right to be fully complete.
Yeah.
And for me, morning coffee was an energy leak and I didn't even know.
The simple things, isn't it? It's the simple things.
Totally.
Simple things.
But if you take all the simple things back, it's a big, juicy, orgasmic, Amrita gold-filled life.
I love how you ended with the little thing. Ended with the small thing after that huge, like, crescendo of magnificence. Right back at the small thing. Remember the small thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love you.
Thank you. I love you.
Just like a hug from across the ocean.
I know. I'm like, cheers for that coffee. I'm gonna make that. I'm gonna do it.
Call me. We'll do it together.
Yes.
Ritual style.
Oh, if anyone has
what you're doing.
If anyone has any questions, please put them below. Like, please, any comments, any questions, anything that you want to ask Eva any more about anything. It's very full, very powerful, spiral.
And kudos if you kept up.
Yes.
Kudos if you kept up. Because Congratulations. Good
Yay.
job. You made it. I love you.
We love you. Goodbye, everyone.